Hey everyone, thanks for checking out one of our past Insta lives. We hope you enjoy the content, and if you do, we hope you'll follow us at Cake Decorating School on Insta. I did two slight variations on the same thing, and I'm going to hold it up and let it focus. So I've done a lighter pink with a darker pink center, right? And you'll see the petals are kind of cupped, so it looks like the petals on a dahlia, they kind of unfurl. It kind of reminds me of someone rolling up their tongue, the petals on one. And as they open up, they get flatter. So I did one version where some of the, especially the outside ones, were flatter. And you can make them, you'll see, so that they're puffed up and you have more frosting, or so that they're a little flatter in profile and there's less. So there's some very easy ways, even with the same colors and the exact same bags, to give yourself a little natural variety, making them look a little open and fuller or a little flatter and tighter. And that's it's same tips, same bags, it's just kind of holding it slightly different. So we'll kind of go over some of the different varieties you can achieve very easily, including color and how you're holding things, just to give you a little more natural variation in what you're doing. So I'm going to put these aside and talk to you briefly about the tips, right? So I'm using mostly number 104s. So those are petal tips that I think come with most basic decorating kits, and most everyone has them, right? It's a nice fat opening at the bottom, skinny at the top. I did work in a 103 because I ran out of 104s. I got excited about colors. And another one is a number 59. It is a slightly curved shape to it, and it's smaller, and it's what I'm using with that darker color for the centers. So hopefully everyone can see that. See, it's got a slight curve. And the way we're using it, it doesn't matter if you're using it left or right-handed, but this is one of those tips that if you're using it to make regular petals and you're a lefty, you'll have to order a special one that curves the other direction. And a lot of companies make those, sometimes they're special order, but you'll see, just try and do one right here. It gives the petals just a slight curve, and it's kind of hard to see it on this, but it has just a slightly curved opening to it, right? And then for my centers, I used number 3 tip with some green, and I also just pulled out a number 1 with some black, because that's a great way to add some depth to the middle, right? And just a little bit of variety, and you can kind of mix up your centers too, because you can do some black, some green, some a mix of the two, right? And then the main thing with these is how we're going to hold it. So if we normally have our flower nail, when I'm piping a regular petal, and I just want the edge of the petal to be up off the surface, I rock the opening of the tip so that that little thin edge is just hovering above the surface of the flower nail while I'm piping. And that means that our flowers don't look really flat and limp and aren't laying completely against the surface. That nice thin edge is just elevated slightly off of it. So you can do that to get the more kind of open ones, right? Or if you want to make cupped petals, when I'm drawing the shape, I'm going to tilt it slightly up. So it's about 20 to 30 degrees off the surface, right, if we're using our imaginations. And that will give the petal that slightly cupped shape. And instead of drawing a big open kind of teardrop shape, it's kind of like a tight little U-turn. So when I start, I'm pulling almost straight out, curving quickly at the end, and trying to pull back almost to where I started, right? And so we're gonna put the paper aside, pull over some cupcakes. It's a little cold in the studio this week, so I just took a little extra buttercream in a light color that I had, and I'm going to do a thin layer on the surface, right? And that is just to help the buttercream stick. These are kind of full coverage designs when you're doing them on cupcakes. It'll take up the whole surface, so you don't totally need to do a layer first. It was just giving me issues the other day when I was piping, so I decided to go ahead and put a little light layer on it, right? And I'm going to start with some white, right? So I have a white 104 tip. I'm going to start, right, and do the kind of flatter one first with the cupped petals. And I'm going to start about, right, if I imagine, let's see, I'm going to mark it, and I hope I don't regret putting black in the center later, right, just a little bit out from the center, right? And I'm going to imagine I'm pulling back towards that dot every time I make one. So I'm just gonna start and go like that, right? And you see, because I'm holding the tip at an angle, right, the petal has a nice cupped shape to it, right? And you don't have to pull it all the way to the center. If you leave a void there, then as you're pulling successive layers of petal, it'll help them angle down, and it actually gives you a really beautiful, pleasing effect. So I'm just gonna keep going, working all the way around, right? If you get excess on your tip, you can just wipe it off on a paper towel. I'm using my finger for convenience, although that can make the sides of your cupcakes messy, right? And I'm just letting the frosting do its thing, right? So every time I pipe one, I rotate my cupcake a little bit, right? And it's just kind of naturally, that allows you to keep your bag in the same position, and you don't have to reposition it every time you're starting a petal. Oh, thanks for the hearts, guys. Wonderful. So you can see they kind of have that lovely little cupped shape, right? I'm going to switch to another bag, same tip, right? And I've striped it so that there's a second color, because oftentimes as they bloom, they have darker center petals and lighter outside ones. And just so I don't mess up my stuff, I'm just going to remove that little black dot, and I'm going to start right a little further back than I did last time, and I'm going to go on top of my petals. So I'll start in between two and a little closer to the center, right, with the fat end of the tip. Same thing where I'm kind of rocking, right, the narrow end up off the surface, and I'm going to pull another layer of cupped petals. And there's a lot of petals on this, so if some of them aren't perfect, don't sweat it, right? It's going to give you a great effect overall once they all blend together, right? And I have a natural tendency to want to lay the tip flat on the surface when I'm piping. So a lot of times I find that as I'm working, they'll start to flatten out a little bit, and I have to correct myself. And that's just from years of piping on a flower nail and making other kinds of flowers. So sometimes following the rules can work against us when we need to break them. So I'm just going to keep going with this and keep making smaller petals. This is where if you have smaller sizes of petal tips, you can always make other bags, right? And keep going. But you see the way I did it, it gave me nice cupped petals and a relatively flat profile on the cupcake, because I started with a void in the center where I was piping the petals, and as I worked in, I'm piping the ends down into that void. I'm going to go ahead and use my 3-tip just to pull some little stamens, right? And then I'm going to go with my 59 and pull just right out with some of them. And it has like a kind of curved feel to the petal, and they're almost a little spiked so that they're kind of opening up. And then I'll just go in and pull some of them so that they kind of curve over top of the green. So it's like it's opening up, and you can see just a little bit of the center of the flower peeking through. It's a little hard to do with the angle because the microphone's kind of in my way. But you can see you get a nice dramatic darker center, beautiful kind of effect with the light pink and the white mixed together, and it's opening up. Right, so I'm going to switch up my colors, right? And the other reason I like doing multiple sets of colors is because now I can let those bags rest, right? I have a case of the hot hands. I warm my buttercream up a lot. It can make it sloppy and harder to work with. So if you do a few varieties of colors and you have a couple of different bags ready, it makes it easy to switch back and forth, do a bunch of different fun combinations, and you also don't have to stop working because you don't have to put them down because they've gotten too hot. Right? So just kind of little trick there. So I'm going to build this one up a little more, right? And I'm going to make the petals a little flatter especially on the outside, and I'm going to start kind of cupping them a little more as they go up. And in order to do that, I'm going to just take my bag and, a little hard without the turntable, it's easier with that, but I'm just going to build up a little mound using, right, my petal tip right there to give me something to pipe those petals on top of, right? And that'll help give it a nice full appearance. So instead of rocking the end of the tip up, I'm gonna leave it flat and pipe more traditional looking petals. And I'm just gonna pull them back so that the end of the tip is hitting that mound as I go. And then I have a nice striped bag that has 2 colors, light and a medium pink in it, and I'm going to use that to do my next layer petals. And I'm just going to pull this just so it's a little bit more cupped, not as dramatic as the first one we did, but just so that they have a little bit of a curve to them. And you can see you get that nice kind of dark pink center to it. Right. And then I'm going to keep going. And having that buildup of frosting in the center will not only allow you, right, to build up the profile a little higher, it gives you a little more space to work in, so you can actually do an extra layer of petals, right? Because you're not just working horizontally across the surface of the cupcake, you can also go vertically, right? And then I'm gonna grab my dark pink bag, just pull some of those petals, and playing around with how you stripe the bags can give you different effects too, because if you only just do a little bit of your lighter or darker color right near the edge, it means that you'll see more of the second color when you do these kinds of petals. I'm just going to pull some black in the center, give it a nice, dark, dramatic center so that it'll be different. Right, and then just do the same thing where I go around and pull a few of these over top. Right. So that's a great variation, right? Beautiful difference in colors, using all the same bags, and also one that's nice, puffy, and built up, so more normal amount of frosting. Or if you have people, family, friends, customers, they're like, I don't like a lot, you can make them a little flatter. So those are 2 different variations, same flour, same tips, same bags.